Why would 5 trained soldiers choose to provoke the quiet woman no one really knew? The mess hall at Eagle Point buzzed with the usual morning rhythm, metal trays clattering, boots scuffing the floor, voices blending into a low, constant hum. 1,000 unremarkable moments folded into each other like clockwork, but some silences carried more weight than noise. And she, Sierra Reynolds, the one everyone thought was just another civilian contractor, moved through that silence like a shadow. She ate alone, as always, her back against the wall, her gaze drifting but never lost. Some thought she was shy. Others thought she was cold. What they didn't see was the calculation in the smallest details, the way her chair angled toward the main exit, the steady rhythm of her fork, the subtle flicker of her eyes that took in the whole room without ever really looking. Master Sergeant Jack Harrington noticed. He always noticed. At 62, with lines carved deep across a face the years hadn't softened, Harrington had lived long enough to trust the instincts that had kept him breathing through 4 decades of service. And his instincts told him Sierra Reynolds wasn't who she claimed to be. The base records called her a logistics clerk, brought in to untangle supply inventory. But she moved like someone who had been tested in fire. He'd seen it before, in men who officially didn't exist. That morning, the recruits noticed her too. Blake Thompson led the group, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying the entitled confidence of a man who never doubted his place. His father, Colonel Richard Thompson, commanded the base. Blake walked with the swagger of inherited authority. Around him clustered his chosen circle, Dexter Wright, wiry and sharp-eyed, Noah Callahan, the weapons specialist, Ryan Matthews, comms and intel, and Chris Malone, the medic. Together they were Alpha Team, Eagle Point's rising stars. Decorated, young, already blooded by Afghanistan. Soldiers who'd been told they were the best so many times they believed it. And now their eyes fixed on Sierra. They didn't corner her all at once. It began with a pause, a look exchanged across the table, the subtle sharpening of smiles. Blake rose first, his tray sliding onto the rack with a casual clatter. The others followed, falling into formation not by order but by habit, as if even in arrogance they moved like soldiers. Harrington saw it before Sierra did, the trajectory that would take them past her table, the deliberate arc of intimidation. His gut tightened. He had half a mind to intervene, but something kept him rooted. Some lessons couldn't be stopped. They had to be lived. Blake stopped beside her. "Morning, Reynolds," he said, the words light, almost friendly, but the undercurrent unmistakable. Sierra looked up. Her expression was neutral, unflinching. "Lieutenant." "Word is you're good with paperwork," Dexter added, leaning casually on the next table. "Not much of a talker, though." "I talk when I have something to say." Her voice was calm, measured. Blake's smile hardened at the edges. "See, that's the thing about Eagle Point. It's a family. Everyone contributes. Everyone shares. Quiet people make us uncomfortable." The mess hall had shifted. Conversations dimmed, forks hovered midair. Soldiers watched out of the corners of their eyes, pretending not to. Everyone knew Alpha Team's reputation. Everyone knew Blake Thompson's shadow stretched farther than his rank. Sierra set her fork down, slowly, deliberately. "I'm here to do a job," she said, "not to make friends." Noah chuckled. The sound was humorless. "Hear that, Blake? She's not interested in making friends." "That's her choice," Blake replied, straightening to his full height. "But having no friends can make things difficult around here, especially for women trying to play in a man's world." The words dropped heavy in the space between them. A test, a warning, a declaration. Sierra's gaze didn't waver. "I've managed in more dangerous environments than this." For the first time a flicker crossed Blake's face, annoyance, maybe curiosity, but he recovered quickly, flashing that polished smile again. "We'll see about that." He gestured to his men and they moved on. Message delivered. The hum of the mess hall resumed, but thinner now, stretched tight across invisible tension. Harrington caught Sierra's eyes from across the room. No words passed, but something in the exchange carried weight. A recognition. The game had begun. By midday, the incident had already warped into rumor. Harrington heard 3 versions before lunch, each one painting Sierra as disrespectful, insubordinate, or worse. The rumor mill at Eagle Point never needed facts, only fuel, and Harrington knew exactly where that fire was heading. He found her later in the communications shed, cataloging outdated radios. She didn't look up when he entered, but acknowledged him with a nod. "You've made quite an impression," Harrington said. "They made theirs first," Sierra replied, her pen moving steadily across the clipboard. "Yesterday in the yard wasn't an accident." "No," Harrington agreed. He moved to the window, scanning the yard outside. "Blake Thompson doesn't handle disrespect well. His father's influence taught him certain expectations." Sierra looked up then, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp. "They mistake quiet for weak. It's a common error." Harrington studied her for a long moment. "Who are you really?" "You already tried that road, Master Sergeant." A faint smile touched her lips. "Your Pentagon friend found nothing. That should tell you everything." "It tells me you're operating under deep cover," Harrington said. "What it doesn't tell me is why." "Some questions," Sierra said softly, "are better left unasked." Before he could respond, the door swung open. Colonel Richard Thompson filled the frame, immaculate uniform, silver hair, the kind of presence that commanded silence before words. "Master Sergeant," he said curtly, acknowledging Harrington before turning to Sierra. "Ms. Reynolds, I believe, our new inventory specialist." "Yes, sir." Sierra's tone shifted instantly into the deferential cadence of a contractor addressing command, cataloging the outdated comms equipment for disposal. "Carry on," the colonel said, then to Harrington, a word. Outside, the air smelled of wet pine, storm clouds brewing. "Fraternizing with contractors now, Jack?" Thompson asked, voice deceptively casual. "Just checking on the process, sir. Some of this equipment dates back to our time." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ms. Reynolds doesn't need supervision. She comes highly recommended from Fort Benning. Her file listed Fort Lewis." Harrington kept his tone even. "Slip of the tongue," the colonel said smoothly, "unless you have concerns about her work." "No concern, sir. She's efficient." "Good, see that it stays that way. Alpha Team begins their rotation next week. I don't want distractions." The word distractions hung in the air, heavier than the gathering storm. That night rain came hard against the Montana earth. Harrington stood at his window, the storm's lightning illuminating the distant ridges. His secure terminal chimed. A message from Dave McCormack, his old comms specialist turned Pentagon contact. "Jack, no Sierra Reynolds exists in any database. Watch yourself. This goes higher than you think." Harrington leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. He'd trusted his instincts his whole career, and now they screamed louder than ever. Whoever she was, Sierra Reynolds wasn't a contractor, and Eagle Point wasn't as secure as it pretended to be. The following morning, 3 unmarked black SUVs rolled through the gates. Government plates, naval officers stepping out, one of them Rear Admiral James Blackwood, a name Harrington hadn't heard in years. Naval Special Warfare, at an Army training facility. Harrington didn't need anyone to tell him. Something was moving beneath the surface, something dangerous, and Sierra Reynolds stood right at the center of it. Why would a Navy admiral fly across the country, just to meet a civilian inventory clerk? The storm had cleared by dawn, leaving Montana scrubbed raw and clean. Pine needles glistened with rain, and the mountains rose sharp against a sky washed pale blue. To the casual eye, Eagle Point looked the same as always: boots on gravel, soldiers drilling, engines revving in the motor pool. But beneath the routines, Harrington sensed it. The base's rhythm had shifted. 3 SUVs sat parked outside headquarters, flanked by military police. Inside, the visitors moved with the calm assurance of people who didn't need to explain themselves. Naval officers in khakis, Their leader, Rear Admiral James Blackwood, carried himself like a man who had long since stopped asking permission. Harrington knew the name. Everyone who had served long enough did. Blackwood had commanded Naval Special Warfare in the years after 9/11. His shadow still stretched across every Tier 1 mission whispered about but never acknowledged. What business did a man like that have at an Army training facility hidden in Montana? By mid-morning, rumors ran like wildfire. Some said it was a joint training review. Others claimed a classified inspection. Harrington ignored the noise. He relied on what he could see, and what he saw told him the base was under a kind of scrutiny it wasn't prepared for. MPs doubled at checkpoints. Comms officers moved with an alertness bordering on nerves. And Colonel Thompson, usually unshakable, looked tighter, more deliberate, as if every gesture carried double meaning. But Sierra, she remained steady. Harrington found her in the motor pool, logging old vehicles like nothing had changed. Her hair pulled back, her clipboard neat, her posture calm. But he'd spent enough years reading the weight in a soldier's shoulders to see the difference. Her movements were sharper, her gaze more frequent toward headquarters. "Important visitors today," Harrington said lightly, leaning against a decommissioned Humvee. "I wouldn't know, Master Sergeant," she replied without looking up. "Rear Admiral Blackwood," he pressed, watching her pen pause mid-stroke for the briefest second. "Seems to have brought quite an entourage." It was gone as quickly as it came, but the slip confirmed what he suspected. She knew exactly who Blackwood was. "Naval officers at an Army facility," Sierra said smoothly, resuming her writing. "Unusual, I suppose." "Very." Harrington crossed his arms, studying her. "Almost as unusual as a civilian contractor who doesn't exist in any database." She looked up then, her expression unreadable. "Persistent, I'll give you that. It's kept me alive for 62 years. Her lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "And it might get you killed now." The words carried no threat, only fact. Before Harrington could answer, the motor pool door opened. Blake Thompson strode in, followed by Dexter Wright and Noah Callahan. Their entrance wasn't casual, it was calculated. They spread out, blocking easy exits. "Reynolds," Blake called, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Just the person we were looking for." Sierra straightened, clipboard loose in her hand. "Can I help you?" "Actually, yes." Blake stopped a few feet away, hands resting easily at his sides. "We need access to the Northeast storage facility, prepping for a training exercise. I'm told you have the inventory list." Harrington's jaw tightened. The request was false. That facility housed classified comms gear. No training exercise would ever require it. "I haven't inventoried that section yet," Sierra said calmly. "You'll need to speak with Captain Morris in Information Systems." "See, that's the problem," Blake replied, stepping closer. "Captain Morris is tied up in meetings all day with our naval visitors, and we need that access now." His eyes flicked briefly to Harrington before returning to Sierra. The air thickened. Dexter and Noah drifted into position by the door, casual but ready. "I can't help you," Sierra said. "I don't have authorization." Blake's smile thinned. "I think you're not understanding me, Reynolds. This isn't a request. My father expects that equipment ready by 1600. "Then your father can issue written orders," Harrington cut in, his voice firm. "Standard procedure for restricted inventory." Blake turned, irritation flashing. "With all due respect, Master Sergeant, this doesn't concern you." "Any access to classified areas concerns me," Harrington shot back. His tone made it clear he wasn't moving. For a moment it teetered. The young lieutenant squared off against the old Master Sergeant, both standing in a silence that could shatter into violence. Then Blake's shoulders eased, his smile snapping back into place. "Of course, Master Sergeant, we'll get the authorization." He glanced at Sierra one last time. "We'll continue this later, Reynolds." They left as smoothly as they came. Sierra returned to her clipboard without comment. Harrington stayed, watching her. They weren't here about inventory. No, she didn't look up. You want to tell me what they were really after? Her eyes lifted, sharp and unwavering. No. The word hung heavier than any explanation. Harrington understood. Whatever game she was playing, Alpha Team had just become a piece of it, and they didn't lose gracefully. That night Harrington took a long route back to his quarters, skirting the restricted section where the visiting officers were housed. Security was tighter than usual, but what caught his eye was a fleeting glimpse through an open door, Sierra, seated across from Admiral Blackwood, deep in conversation. The door shut before he could see more, but the image burned. A supposed contractor, speaking privately with the former head of Naval Special Warfare. The puzzle wasn't just missing pieces, it was forming an entirely different picture. Later, unable to sleep, Harrington went to the archives. The basement smelled of old paper and disinfectant, shelves stacked high with forgotten records. He pulled files, hunting instinctively, not sure what he was after until his hands found a faded personnel folder. Richard A. Thompson, then captain, Eagle Point, 1986. Nothing unusual in the service record, nothing except a photograph. Thompson with his training cadre, 8 men standing before the newly built facility. But a note at the bottom caught Harrington's eye, Joint Operations Citadel. The name stirred memory, rumors whispered during Desert Storm. A unit operating outside official channels, nothing ever confirmed, nothing ever written. Harrington filed the image away in his mind. Another file, more recent, slipped open. A photograph of Navy SEALs in Afghanistan, faces shadowed by gear and sun. A scribble on the back, Operation Phantom Shield. Korangal Valley, April 2008. He almost put it away until he saw it. One figure smaller than the rest, posture unmistakable. Someone had blacked out the face with marker, not a bureaucratic redaction, a deliberate concealment. Harrington slid the photo into his pocket. As he left the archives, the Montana night bit cold against his skin. He walked alone back toward his quarters, and from the shadows beside his door, a figure stepped out. Sierra Reynolds. Her face was grave, eyes lit faintly by the dim security lamps. "We need to talk," she said softly, "but not here and not as Sierra Reynolds." What kind of secret would make a soldier hide her own name? They met at the abandoned radar dome on Eagle Point's eastern edge. Once, it had tracked Soviet bombers over the Arctic. Now it stood hollow, a concrete shell filled with echoes and dust, perfect for a conversation no one was meant to hear. Harrington arrived first, slipping past patrols like a man who'd spent his life studying blind spots. The dome smelled of wet concrete, the storm still bleeding through cracks in the ceiling. He waited by the corroded console, flashlight off, letting his eyes adjust. 10 minutes later she came. No light, no sound but the soft tread of boots across grit. She moved with the assurance of someone who didn't need to see to know exactly where she was. "You're taking a risk meeting me here," Harrington said quietly. "You're the one who pulled a file from the archives you weren't supposed to touch," she replied. Her voice was different now, less measured contractor, more sharpened steel. Harrington held up the photograph from Afghanistan, the SEALs, the blacked-out face. "Yours, I'm guessing." She studied it a moment, then handed it back. "You shouldn't have this." "Probably not, just like I shouldn't have noticed Admiral Blackwood's interest in a logistics clerk." He paused. "Who are you really?" The silence stretched, broken only by the low roll of thunder outside. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed again, lower, steadier, stripped of disguise. "Lieutenant Sierra Davidson, United States Navy, SEAL Team 6. The words landed like a rifle shot. Despite the suspicions that had gnawed at him, Harrington still felt the weight of it. A female SEAL, one of the few who had ever made it through the crucible. Officially, they didn't exist, just like the unit itself didn't exist, but he believed her. He'd seen too much not to. SEAL Team 6 doesn't exist, he said finally. Neither do I, she replied. That's the point. He let out a slow breath, piecing it together. Operation Phantom Shield, those weapons caches in Korangal, you were there. Her eyes darkened. We found American weapons, weapons that should never have left U.S. soil, javelins, carbines, machine guns, all with serial numbers traced back here. Eagle Point. Here, Harrington's gut clenched. Yes, she stepped closer, her voice taut with memory. 3 of my teammates died securing that shipment. We filed reports. The investigation vanished, buried. Months later, another cache, same source, same signature, this base. The truth hung heavy in the dome, heavier than the storm pressing against its walls. You're telling me someone here has been funneling weapons to the enemy, Harrington said. She nodded once. Not just someone, command. This place is compromised, and it's been happening for years. He felt his chest tighten. How many young soldiers had he trained? Kids who deployed to the same valleys she was describing, only to face their own rifles in enemy hands. You have proof, he asked. Enough for naval intelligence to send me here under cover. Enough for Admiral Blackwood to step onto an army base he has no business being on. She studied him. But this isn't your fight, Master Sergeant. He gave a bitter laugh. It became my fight the moment American weapons started killing American soldiers. You could walk away, she pressed. You're 5 years past retirement, you've done your part. Some debts never expire, Harrington said quietly. His mind flashed to Basra, 1991. 8 pilots pulled from captivity only because ghost operators had appeared in the night. He never forgot. And 30 years ago, someone like you saved my men when the system failed them. If the system is failing now, then the debt falls due again. She studied him for a long time, the storm crackling faintly overhead. Finally, she nodded. The Peterson farm, 2 miles east of the main gate. Tomorrow night, 2200, come alone. If you're playing both sides, I'll know, and you won't enjoy the consequences. She disappeared into the darkness, leaving him with the smell of rain and the weight of betrayal pressing harder than the storm. The next day, Eagle Point looked the same, but Harrington's eyes had changed. Every soldier's laugh, every officer's command, every routine suddenly felt like camouflage for something rotten. Colonel Thompson carried himself with crisp confidence, briefing the command staff like nothing was amiss. But Harrington heard something different now in the colonel's words, the casual authority of a man who had worn a mask for too long and grown comfortable in it. Alpha Team prowled the base with restless energy, sharper than usual. Blake Thompson's eyes tracked Sierra whenever she appeared. They were predators circling prey, and Sierra was letting them. Harrington saw it, her deliberate calm, her calculated provocations. She was baiting them, keeping their attention fixed on her cover while her mission cut deeper unseen. That night Harrington drove east under a sky full of stars. The Peterson farm loomed ahead, long abandoned, its roof sagging, windows hollow. But behind the barn, hidden in plain sight, Sierra waited. You weren't followed, she said, stepping from the shadows. Not a question, an assessment. No, Harrington joined her. But Thompson knows I was in the archives. He questioned me. That complicates things, Sierra admitted. But maybe it helps. If he still doubts you, you're useful. If he trusted you fully, you'd already be in a cell. Inside the barn, she pulled back a rusted cabinet to reveal a steel door, its keypad glowing faintly. With a code, the lock disengaged. A narrow staircase led down into the dark. Outpost 7, she explained as they descended. Cold War relic, officially decommissioned, never really abandoned. The bunker hummed faintly with power. Maps lined the walls, red pins marking supply routes. Surveillance gear sat ready, alongside weapons too modern for a forgotten hideout. This is our forward operating base, she said. We've been here 3 months monitoring Eagle Point. Every thread leads back to one place, Colonel Richard Thompson. 15 years in command. Absolute authority over requisition, transport, deployment, perfect access, perfect cover. She slid a folder across the table. Offshore accounts, transactions tied to shipments, a photograph Colonel Thompson in civilian clothes meeting a known arms broker in Dubai. Harrington stared. That's treason. It's worse, Sierra said. It's betrayal. Every weapon that leaves here kills more than just soldiers. It kills trust. It kills the idea that the system protects its own. Harrington's fists clenched against the table. So what now? We catch him in the act, she replied. The next shipment is close. Too much chatter, too much movement. When it happens, we'll have eyes on every step. She pointed to a spot on the base map. The tunnels, old Cold War infrastructure, sealed on paper, still open in reality, perfect for moving crates no one's supposed to see. Harrington nodded slowly. I know them. I know the blind spots. Good, her voice hardened. Because when this breaks, Alpha Team will be the ones carrying those crates, and Blake Thompson won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way. Her eyes met his across the table, steady and unflinching. That includes you, Master Sergeant. What would you do if the very system you swore to defend turned out to be the enemy? Morning broke clean and sharp, the kind of Montana dawn that seemed almost too honest, sunlight cutting through pine trees, mountain ridges outlined in gold. Soldiers at Eagle Point lined up for formation, their cadence steady, their uniforms crisp. The ritual looked the same as it had for decades, but to Harrington it was different now. Every salute, every barked order, every marching boot hit him with a new weight, because somewhere in that perfect rhythm lay rot. Somewhere in those uniforms walked men who had betrayed their oath. Colonel Thompson emerged from headquarters at precisely 6:15, as he always did, tall and immaculate, the picture of Army authority. His voice carried with practiced ease, briefing the troops about perimeter security, reminding them of restricted training zones, stressing discipline and vigilance. Nothing in his tone betrayed corruption. Nothing in his face showed the shadow Sierra had painted. But Harrington saw it now, or maybe he just believed it was there, and belief was enough to make every word sound false. 20 yards away, Sierra Reynolds, Lieutenant Davidson in truth, stood among civilian contractors, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. No one watching would suspect she had spent the night underground in a Cold War bunker, planning to bring down the colonel himself. And Blake Thompson, he prowled the motor pool with his men restless, keyed up. His gaze tracked Sierra whenever she moved, not curious now, not dismissive, predatory. By midday, Harrington's instincts told him something was shifting. Too many supply movements to the northeastern facility. Too many adjustments in the guard rotations around the old maintenance shed. And then the final sign, a transport manifest logged into the system, perfectly signed and stamped, scheduling a convoy to depart at 400 hours. Destination, Washington State. Cargo, training equipment. The paperwork was flawless, too flawless. He contacted Sierra through the pager she'd given him. A single pulse, invisible to the base but enough to summon her. They met in the old communications bunker, where forgotten radios gathered dust. You found something, she said, the contractor's mask dropping the moment the door shut. Convoy 10 vehicles, tomorrow 0400. Destination Washington State, officially training gear, unofficially, he handed her the log. It stinks. Her eyes scanned it quickly, too perfect, same pattern as before. There's more, Harrington added. Security rotations shifted, 30-minute gap around the maintenance shed, right before the convoy departs. Sierra's jaw tightened. That's when they'll move the crates. And Colonel Thompson, Harrington asked. She hesitated, scheduled himself for an inspection across the base at the same time, classic misdirection. A cold silence filled the bunker. Harrington had seen it before in East Germany, in Iraq. A diversion on one side, a crime on the other. Different decades, same playbook. We'll have surveillance in place, Sierra said firmly. Admiral Blackwood's team will cover the ridge line. We document everything, vehicles, cargo, personnel. Then we bring it forward. That's if it goes clean, Harrington said. It has to. Her tone left no room for doubt. The bunker door opened then, admitting Amanda Foster, quiet, forgettable, one of the visiting naval staff. At least that was her cover. In truth, CIA counterintelligence. Another layer in the web. "We have a problem," Foster said, closing the door behind her. Her voice was calm, but tension edged every syllable. Alpha Team accessed the northeastern storage facility. They removed 3 encryption modules and validation keys. Sierra froze. When? 30 minutes ago. With those, they can generate authentic transport documentation. Nothing will stop the convoy. Foster slid papers across the table. Inventory discrepancies confirm it. $2 million in weapons and advanced systems. Carbines, machine guns, javelins. It's not training gear. It's an arsenal. Harrington exhaled slowly. Destination. Washington's just the waypoint, Foster replied. Financial traces point to Dubai, a private airfield with ties to arms dealers feeding insurgents in Afghanistan and Syria. The words hit like a punch. American soldiers dying overseas, cut down by weapons stolen under American authority. Sierra didn't flinch. Then we move up our timeline. They've accelerated, so do we. Foster nodded. Surveillance is already positioning. Thermal imaging, acoustic sensors, quantum trackers, tools Thompson won't be expecting. Harrington studied them both, the younger women carrying the weight of a betrayal older than their careers. He felt the years pressing down on him, the choice crystallizing. Step aside or step into the storm. He already knew his answer. That evening Harrington sought quiet in the chapel. The wooden pews smelled faintly of dust and polish. Stained glass glowed faintly as the last light of day filtered through. He knelt in silence, not in prayer. He had stopped believing years ago, but in reflection. He was about to fight a war not against enemies in desert valleys, but against men in his own uniform, and he wasn't sure which was worse. The door creaked. Footsteps approached. Blake Thompson slid into the pew in front of him. "Unusual to see you here, Master Sergeant," Blake said softly, eyes fixed forward. "Reflection, is it?" "Reflection's valuable when the end approaches," Harrington replied evenly. Blake gave a thin smile. "On duty, on loyalty, on the choices we make." Harrington's gut tightened. Blake wasn't here by chance. This was a probe. "You've served longer than anyone," Blake continued. "My father respects that. So do I. You understand sacrifice, the kind that matters." "Every generation understands sacrifice," Harrington said carefully. "The cause may change, but the oath doesn't." Blake turned slightly, studying him. "The oath, to the Constitution, to the system that ties our hands, politicians, bureaucrats, rules written by men who never stood in a firefight. I've watched those rules bury soldiers, my friends, haven't you?" Harrington held his gaze on the cross at the front of the chapel. He knew where this was going. The younger man's voice carried the same poison he'd heard in foreign officers, in men who believed loyalty to their own power mattered more than loyalty to principle. "The oath keeps us from becoming what we fight," Harrington said finally. His voice was steady, but it cost him. "That's the line, Lieutenant. Cross it, and you're no better than the enemy." Silence stretched. Then Blake nodded slowly. "My father says you're loyal, that you know what's at stake. I hope he's right. There's a briefing tomorrow, 0430. Command staff only. He specifically requested you." He rose, smoothing his uniform with practiced precision, and walked out. Harrington remained in the pew, his pulse steady but cold. A command briefing. At the exact time the convoy was scheduled to move. Coincidence didn't exist in places like this. Either Richard Thompson wanted him out of the way, or he was about to test Harrington's loyalty face to face. 20 minutes later, Harrington slipped into the shadows near the visiting officers' quarters. He tapped the pen Foster had given him 3 times, sending a silent signal. By the time he reached the old motor pool, Sierra was there, clipboard in hand, still wearing her contractor mask. But her eyes sharpened when he spoke. "Briefing tomorrow, 0430. Colonel Thompson requested me by name." Her expression didn't shift, but Harrington saw the calculation behind her stillness. "They're either testing you," she said, "or removing you from the field." "Either way, I won't be outside when the convoy moves," Harrington said. "Then you'll be inside," Sierra countered. "At the command center, accessing communications, authorizations, deployment orders, evidence we'd never get otherwise. Unless it's a trap. If it were, you wouldn't have received an invitation. You'd already be in cuffs." The logic was brutal, but it was true. Harrington leaned against the wall, the weight of decades pressing into his shoulders. "At 62, I should be easing out. Instead, I'm about to walk into the heart of treason." Sierra's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Sometimes the heart of it is exactly where you're needed." "What happens when loyalty to your oath collides with loyalty to your commander?" The base was still cloaked in darkness when Harrington entered headquarters. 4:30 hours. Soldiers moved like shadows, their voices hushed, their movements sharper than usual. Outside, the convoy engines rumbled, warming in the cold Montana dawn. The air carried that distinct weight before something irreversible begins. Colonel Richard Thompson stood at the head of the briefing room, immaculate as ever. Maps spread across the table, a projection flickered on the far wall. He looked calm, controlled, like a man fully in command of his world. Around him sat Alpha Team, each soldier crisp, focused, carrying that dangerous edge of men who believed the rules didn't apply to them. Blake's eyes met Harrington as he entered, sharp and cold. "Master Sergeant Harrington," Thompson said smoothly, "good of you to join us. Sit." Harrington obeyed, lowering himself into a chair at the far end. He said nothing, waiting. The colonel began. "Convoy Delta is scheduled to depart in 20 minutes. Destination classified, cargo training materials." He glanced briefly around the room, his voice even. "This is a test of loyalty, of clarity. The world is changing, gentlemen. Our enemies adapt faster than our own government. If we wait on bureaucracy, we lose, and I don't lose." The words cut sharper than any order Harrington had heard in decades. They weren't the words of a commander serving a nation. They were the words of a man serving himself. Blake leaned forward, speaking as if to confirm what everyone already knew. "We move the crates tonight, secure the drop, and by the time Washington realizes, the weapons will already be overseas. Our soldiers in the field will benefit, unrestricted supply lines, resources unchained by politics." A lie dressed in patriotism. Harrington's stomach turned. He'd seen this before, in warlords, in corrupt commanders, in men who started out believing they were the answer and ended up selling everything sacred. Thompson's gaze turned on Harrington. "And you, Jack, you've served longer than any man here. You know the failures of our system. Tell me, shouldn't we build something stronger than red tape and committees?" The room stilled. Alpha Team's eyes locked on him. Harrington's heart pounded steady. This was the moment. Say the wrong thing and he'd vanish before dawn. Say the right thing and he might live long enough to see the convoy move. He chose his words like stepping stones across a river. "Sir, I've buried too many young men because Washington failed them. I've also buried men because commanders believed they were above the oath. Either way, it ends the same in the ground. The question is, how many more you want to bury?" A silence fell, thick and dangerous. Thompson's jaw worked, eyes narrowing. Blake bristled, fists clenching. For a moment Harrington thought he'd crossed too far. But then the colonel smiled. Cold, calculated. "You've earned the right to your doubts," Thompson said evenly. "But remember, doubts don't win wars. Actions do. And tonight you'll see actions that matter." He gestured sharply. "Dismissed." Alpha Team rose, moving like predators freed from the leash. Blake passed Harrington on the way out, leaning just close enough to whisper, "Choose carefully, old man. This is bigger than you." Outside, the convoy lined up, 10 trucks idling, headlights dimmed, drivers waiting. Soldiers moved with precision, crates being loaded from the maintenance shed. Crates Harrington knew weren't filled with training gear. From the ridge line above, unseen by most, Sierra's team watched through scopes and thermal optics. Every movement cataloged, every soldier's face recorded. Proof, enough to bring the whole operation down. Harrington lingered near the rear of the convoy, his posture casual, his eyes taking in everything. Blake barked orders, Dexter checked manifests, Noah secured weapons. Ryan and Chris scanned the perimeter. It was smooth, too smooth. Until the third crate slipped. A corner cracked open just enough for the contents to glint under the floodlight. Not training gear, rifles, clean, oiled serial numbers filed away. Harrington's chest tightened, proof in the open. One of the younger privates glanced at it, confusion flickering in his eyes. Blake saw the look, and in an instant his hand was on the soldier's shoulder, his voice low and sharp. The private stiffened, nodded, and looked away. Lesson delivered. See nothing. Say nothing. Harrington turned his gaze toward the tree line. He knew Sierra was there, watching, and he wondered what it cost her to stay hidden while the betrayal unfolded in plain sight. At 500, the convoy rolled out, engines growling, tires grinding gravel into dust. Harrington climbed into the trailing Humvee beside Blake. The younger man studied him in the dim light, suspicion coiled tight in his eyes. "You're quiet tonight," Blake said. "Quiet doesn't mean blind," Harrington replied. Blake smirked, leaning back in his seat. "Good. Then watch closely. You're looking at the future, soldiers unchained, commanders who don't answer to weak men in suits, the kind of military America deserves." Harrington didn't answer. His silence was heavier than words. The convoy snaked through the forest road, headlights slicing the dark. 20 minutes out, the lead truck slowed. A checkpoint loomed ahead, 2 MPs, rifles slung, a barrier lowered. Official. Routine. Except Harrington knew the schedule. No checkpoint should have been there. Blake stiffened, his hand brushing the pistol at his side. "What the hell is this?" The MPs approached. One raised his hand, signaling the convoy to stop. The driver killed the engine. The night fell thick with silence. Then from the ridgeline, a voice cracked through the radios, calm, precise, female. "Sierra. Convoy Delta, you are surrounded. Step out of your vehicles with your hands visible. This operation is over." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then Blake exploded. "Move now," he shouted, slamming his fist against the dash. Gunfire erupted, sharp, deafening. Muzzle flashes lit the night as Alpha Team poured out of the trucks, firing toward the ridge line. The false MPs dropped, replaced by shadows moving with lethal precision. Sierra's team, Naval Special Warfare. Harrington ducked low, his instincts kicking in, decades of combat muscle memory roaring back to life. He had seconds to choose. Side with the colonel's son and die a traitor, or side with Sierra and die a soldier. Blake wrenched open the door, rifle raised, eyes wild. "With me, old man," he barked, dragging Harrington toward the crates. But Harrington's hand went not to Blake's rifle, but to his own sidearm. His voice was steady, cold, carrying across the chaos. "No, Lieutenant, not with you." Blake's eyes widened, betrayal written in shock. The shot cracked through the night. What do you do when the truth finally steps into the light, but the cost of it is blood? The shot still rang in Harrington's ears as Blake staggered back, eyes wide, disbelief etched across his face. The bullet had torn through his shoulder, spinning him off balance. Not fatal, not yet, but the betrayal cut deeper than the wound. "You," Blake gasped, clutching the bleeding arm, "you chose them." Harrington's jaw clenched. "I chose the oath." The night erupted. Sierra's team swept down the ridgeline with precision, dark figures moving like ghosts, rifles barking in short, controlled bursts. Alpha Team countered with raw aggression, their fire chaotic but deadly. Trucks lit up in muzzle flash, crates splintering as bullets ripped through wood. Harrington dove for cover, heart pounding with the weight of decades. He hadn't fired in anger in years, but the instincts hadn't dulled. His pistol barked once, twice, dropping a soldier who had raised a rifle toward Sierra as she sprinted across the clearing. The convoy was no longer a convoy, it was a battlefield. Sierra's voice cut through the chaos, calm and firm. Secure the trucks, eyes on the crates, Alpha Team is priority. Her operators moved like a machine. Ryan Matthews tried to flank left. He was met by two suppressed shots that dropped him hard into the dirt. Dexter Wright set up a light machine gun on the hood of a truck, spitting fire into the tree line, until Foster's voice rang out and a grenade sent him tumbling. Blake, bleeding but furious, crawled toward Harrington, rage boiling in his eyes. "You old fool," he spat. "You think they care about you. You're just a pawn. My father, he'll bury you for this." Harrington grabbed him by the vest, pulling him close. "Maybe, but better buried clean than living dirty." He shoved Blake back against the Humvee, disarming him with a sharp twist. The lieutenant crumpled, gasping, blood darkening his sleeve. The firefight slowed, then broke. Sierra's team overwhelmed the resistance, silencing gun after gun until the night was filled only with groans and the acrid smell of burned powder. Alpha Team was down 2 dead, 2 wounded, 1 unconscious. The convoy drivers stood frozen, hands raised, terrified. "Clear," Sierra called, scanning the perimeter. The forest fell quiet, too quiet. And then headlights. From the south road, a line of vehicles surged forward, base security trucks, floodlights blazing, tires kicking up gravel. At the front, Colonel Richard Thompson, standing tall in the bed of a jeep, his voice booming through a loudspeaker. "Stand down immediately. You are firing on United States Army personnel. Drop your weapons now." Sierra's operators hesitated, rifles shifting. To any outside eye, it looked like betrayal, that a rogue team had ambushed loyal soldiers. The colonel's timing was perfect. Harrington's gut sank. He understood the move. Thompson hadn't just prepared the convoy, he had prepared the narrative. By dawn, Sierra's team would be painted as traitors, rogue operators attacking their own. And Harrington, standing among them, would be written off as a bitter old soldier who'd finally snapped. Sierra's eyes met his. Calm but burning, she didn't need words. The trap had just closed. "Orders?" Foster hissed, crouched beside her. Sierra didn't answer immediately. She scanned the ridge line, the crates, the wounded men at her feet. Choices weighed heavy, each one lethal in its own way. Finally, her voice cut the night. "We don't fire on U.S. uniforms unless fired upon. Hold your ground." The colonel's jeep screeched to a halt. Thompson himself leapt down, his uniform immaculate even in the chaos, his expression a mask of controlled fury. Floodlights painted the scene bright as day, Alpha Team down, trucks riddled, crates shattered open to reveal the truth. Weapons, not training gear. Yet Thompson walked past it all, ignoring the evidence at his feet, his gaze fixed on Sierra. "You," he thundered, "you've compromised this base. You've led men into mutiny. You'll answer for this under federal court." Sierra stood unflinching, her weapon lowered but ready. "Those crates are evidence, Colonel, evidence you can't explain away." Thompson's eyes flicked to Harrington, for the first time a crack in his mask. "Jack, tell them what happened here, that this was an ambush, that these outsiders attacked without cause." The silence was suffocating. Every soldier's eyes turned to him. Harrington, the oldest man on base, the one whose word carried the weight of decades, the one who could decide the narrative with a single sentence. His chest tightened. He thought of the young men he had buried, of their families who had trusted the flag, of the oath he had sworn when he was barely older than Blake. His voice came low but steady. "No, Richard, the only ambush here is yours." The words cracked like a rifle shot. Gasps rippled through the line of soldiers. Thompson's face darkened, his control slipping for the first time. "You're finished, Jack. You've just thrown away a lifetime of service for a lie." Harrington stepped closer, his eyes locked on the colonel's. "No, I've just reclaimed it." The colonel's hand twitched toward his sidearm. Sierra moved faster. Her rifle snapped up, barrel steady. "Don't," she said quietly. "Not tonight." The standoff stretched. The colonel's men shifted uneasily, the truth in the crates gnawing at their obedience. Sierra's team stood firm, proof in their hands, conviction in their eyes, and Harrington, between them, felt the weight of history pressing in. For 30 years he had carried loyalty as a shield. Now, for the first time, he carried it as a sword. The convoy was secured by dawn. Sierra's team had photographed every crate, every manifest, every serial number. The evidence was irrefutable, yet Thompson wasn't in chains. Not yet. He stood surrounded by his loyalists, his posture rigid, his silence heavy. Harrington knew why. Men like Thompson didn't fall in a night. They fell slowly, dragged down by truth inch by inch, and until that process finished, the danger was far from over. But for now, the tide had shifted. The weapons were no longer disappearing into the dark. They were exposed, raw under the morning light. Harrington stood beside Sierra as the first rays touched the mountains. She looked exhausted, eyes shadowed, but her voice carried quiet strength. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Harrington agreed. His gaze stayed fixed on the colonel, who stood like a man already writing his counterattack in his head. "It's just beginning." What happens when exposing the truth only makes the system turn against you. 2 days later, the base felt colder, as if the Montana air itself carried suspicion. The crates were gone, seized by naval intelligence and transported under armed escort. Admiral Blackwood had vanished back east with Foster, carrying evidence strong enough to bring down governments. But Colonel Richard Thompson was still here. He walked the base with the same crisp stride, his uniform pressed, his authority intact. Officially, he was under investigation. Unofficially, he still commanded. His words still shaped schedules, his shadow still stretched over every formation. That was the thing about power, Harrington thought. It didn't vanish overnight, it lingered, it poisoned. The soldiers felt it. Conversations stopped when Sierra walked into a room. Eyes followed Harrington with quiet calculation. No one knew who to believe. Rumors spread faster than facts. That Sierra's team had staged the crates, that Harrington had finally snapped, that Alpha Team had been sacrificed as pawns in a bigger game. An Alpha Team, what was left of them, remained under guard in the infirmary, their wounds healing, their loyalty unshaken. Blake, his arm bound in white bandages, refused to speak to anyone but his father. Harrington saw the fire in the young man's eyes, rage not just at the bullet but at the betrayal. That wound would never close. Sierra moved like a ghost across the base, her cover blown but her mission not yet finished. She met with Harrington at odd hours, their conversations clipped, tense. Every step they took felt watched. One evening, they stood at the edge of the training yard, the setting sun throwing long shadows across the gravel. Sierra's face was unreadable, but her voice carried the weight of unspoken truths. "Blackwood's gone. The evidence is in D.C., but don't think that means Thompson will fall. Men like him don't go quietly. He's already calling in favors, twisting narratives. By the time this hits the Pentagon, it'll be a fog of counterclaims and denials." Harrington nodded grimly. He'd seen it before. Corruption dressed itself in patriotism, betrayal cloaked in loyalty. By the time truth reached daylight, it was unrecognizable. "He'll paint us as rogues," Sierra continued. "You especially. A bitter old sergeant who couldn't let go, manipulated by outsiders. They'll tarnish your name before they tarnish his." Harrington let the words settle. His name, his service, his life. It was all he had left. To see it dragged through the mud cut deeper than he wanted to admit. But then he thought of the soldiers buried because of weapons funneled through Eagle Point. He thought of their families, waiting for answers they'd never get. "My name doesn't matter," he said finally. "The truth does." Sierra studied him, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "You're stubborn, Harrington." "Old habit," he said, almost smiling. The next morning the summons came. Colonel Thompson's office, 900 hours. The room smelled of leather and paper, sunlight pouring through the blinds in sharp stripes. Thompson stood behind his desk, immaculate calm, as if nothing had changed. Blake sat in the corner, his arm in a sling, his eyes burning holes into Harrington's back. "Sit," Thompson said smoothly. Harrington didn't. He stood rigid, hands clasped behind him. "You've embarrassed this command," the colonel began, his tone sharp but measured. "You've endangered lives. You've allowed outsiders to manipulate you into betraying your brothers, but I'm offering you a chance." He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy. "Retract your statement. Testify that the crates were part of a classified exercise misinterpreted by overzealous naval personnel. Say you misread the situation. You'll retire quietly with honor intact. No hearings, no trials, your pension safe, your legacy preserved." Harrington stared at him, disbelief flickering into anger. "You want me to lie?" "I want you to protect the institution you've spent your life serving," Thompson snapped. "Do you think tearing it apart helps anyone? Do you think exposing cracks makes us stronger? No, it weakens us. It feeds our enemies. We can handle problems inside our house, but you've dragged this into the street for the world to see." His words were smooth, compelling, carrying that tone of command Harrington had obeyed for decades. For a moment, a dangerous thought stirred. Maybe silence was easier. Maybe the system could fix itself if given time. Then he saw Blake's eyes, burning with arrogance, entitlement, the same poison that had eaten his father. And Harrington knew. If he bent now, the next generation would carry the rot forward. "No deal," Harrington said. His voice was quiet but unyielding. "You betrayed your oath, and I won't betray mine to cover it." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Then you're finished." "Maybe," Harrington said, "but so are you." He turned and walked out, leaving silence and fury in his wake. By nightfall, retaliation came. Sierra was ambushed near the comms shed, 3 men trying to drag her into a Humvee. She fought like lightning, breaking one man's arm, slamming another into the gravel until the third drew a blade. Harrington arrived in time, his sidearm cracking twice, sending the attacker sprawling. Blood pooled on the dirt. One man groaned, another lay still, the third scrambled into the dark. Sierra wiped blood from her lip, breathing hard. "Thompson, not waiting for Washington," she said. "He's cleaning house himself." They dragged the bodies into the shadows, silent, the night air heavy with the cost of survival. Harrington's hands shook, not from fear but from fury. "You can't fight shadows with shadows," he muttered. "Then we drag them into the light," Sierra said fiercely. "Tomorrow we take it public, not through the chain of command, straight to the press." Harrington froze. "That's suicide." "It's survival," Sierra countered. "Once it's public they can't bury it, they can't erase us. The risk is ours, but the truth survives." Her eyes locked on his. "Are you willing to pay that price?" The question cut deeper than any bullet. Harrington thought of the chapel, of the oath, of the young men buried because of weapons sold in the dark. He thought of his own life, nearing its end, weighed against the lives yet to come. His answer came steady, quiet. "Yes." That night Harrington couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, the dim lamp casting long shadows across the room. He wrote a letter, one last record in case tomorrow never came. Words for those who might never hear his voice. "I don't know if the system will listen. I don't know if the truth will survive. But I know silence is death. And if I've learned anything, it's this: sometimes loyalty isn't obedience. Sometimes loyalty is defiance. He folded the letter, slid it beneath his Bible, and turned out the light. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. What if telling the truth meant losing everything you had left? The morning air was brittle, sharp against the lungs, the kind of cold that made every sound carry. Harrington walked across Eagle Point's parade ground with Sierra at his side. Neither spoke. Their silence wasn't fear, it was resolve. Today, the choice would be made permanent. They entered the comms bunker. Foster was waiting, her hair pulled back, eyes hollow with fatigue. A laptop glowed on the table, its secure uplink already alive, a journalist's face flickering on the screen. A name Harrington recognized, an investigative reporter who had burned careers with nothing more than evidence and persistence. "This is it," Foster said quietly. "We release the files, the photos, the manifests. Once they're public, there's no walking it back. Thompson will move against us within the hour, but Washington won't be able to bury it." Sierra slid a drive across the table, her fingers steady. "Everything's here. Operation Phantom Shield, the weapons caches, the Dubai meetings, Alpha Team's movements, the convoy last week." The journalist leaned closer, his voice low but electric. "If what you're saying is true, this will shake the Pentagon. Are you ready for what comes next?" Sierra's eyes flicked to Harrington. He nodded once. "Do it." Foster hit enter. The files began uploading, line after line, photographs spilling into the system like sunlight piercing through clouds, proof too heavy to ignore. The screen flickered, then went black. The uplink died. Harrington's gut twisted, cut off. Foster scrambled to reboot. Sierra was already moving, her instincts sharp. She knew what this meant. And then the blast came. The bunker door shuddered, the sound of a concussive charge tearing the hinges. Smoke and dust filled the room. Harrington hit the floor as soldiers stormed in, men in Eagle Point uniforms, faces hard, rifles raised. At their center stood Blake Thompson, pale but alive, sling still on his arm, pistol steady in his good hand. "You should have walked away," Blake spat, eyes burning. "Now you're enemies of the United States." Harrington rose slowly, his pistol at his side but not raised. "No, son, we're its last defenders." The standoff stretched, rifles leveled, breath ragged. Sierra shifted fractionally, her stance low, calculating angles, exits. Foster clutched the laptop, trying to shield the evidence. Then Colonel Thompson stepped into the smoke, his voice calm, cold, echoing in the tight space. "Enough," he said. "Drop your weapons, this ends now." His gaze fixed on Harrington. "Jack, don't make me destroy you. You've served too long to end like this." Harrington's pulse was steady. Every decision of his life seemed to fold into this moment. He thought of Basra, of Iraq, of the oath spoken by trembling young voices. He thought of graves lined in perfect rows. He thought of Sierra, carrying the weight of battles she would never be thanked for. And he made his choice. "I won't end as a coward." He raised his pistol, not at Blake, not at the soldiers, at the ceiling, where the old comms relay still hung, fragile but wired directly to the backup satellite. The shot cracked, sparks exploded. The relay burst alive for 3 seconds, 3 long, impossible seconds, and in that time, Foster's laptop sent its last surge of data skyward. Transmission complete. Soldiers lunged. Gunfire erupted. Harrington dropped, rolling behind a console, firing back with the instinct of a lifetime. Sierra moved like lightning, disarming one man, striking another down with the butt of her rifle. Foster dragged the laptop into cover, clutching it like salvation. Blake charged Harrington, fury burning through pain, pistol raised. Their eyes locked, youth against age, arrogance against experience. "You betrayed us," Blake shouted. "No," Harrington said, his voice calm even as bullets tore the air. "I betrayed you." The fight was brutal. Blake swung, Harrington countered, fists and elbows cracking in the narrow space. Age slowed him, but experience sharpened him. Finally, with a desperate twist, Harrington slammed Blake against the steel wall. The pistol clattered to the floor. Blake slumped, groaning, unconscious. By the time the gunfire ceased, the room was chaos. Bodies groaning on the floor, smoke curling through broken lights, the laptop still glowing faintly. Sierra stood at the center, chest heaving, rifle steady. "It's done," she said. Foster looked at the screen. Transmission confirmed. "It's out. Every file, every name, they can't bury it now." Silence fell, heavy and final. Colonel Thompson stood at the doorway, shoulders squared, face pale with fury. He stared at Harrington for a long moment, then at his son crumpled on the floor. For the first time, his mask cracked. "This isn't over," he whispered. "No," Harrington replied, his voice gravel but steady. "It's just the beginning for you." Thompson turned, his men dragging him away, not in triumph now, but in retreat. By sunset, Washington was already on fire. News outlets screamed of treason, of weapons sold into enemy hands, of betrayal rooted in Eagle Point. Investigations launched overnight. Arrest warrants drafted. For Sierra, it meant reassignment. Another mission in another place, her name once again buried beneath false records. She shook Harrington's hand at the gate, her grip firm. "You could have walked away," she said. "I've been walking away for too long," he replied. She studied him, a rare softness in her eyes. "History won't remember you, but soldiers will." He gave a weary smile. "That's enough." Then she was gone, swallowed into the machinery of silence. Harrington remained. Officially retired now, his name mudded by whispers, his record stained by accusations he would never fully shake. But he didn't care. Because the truth had survived. Weeks later, Harrington sat alone in the chapel, the pews empty, the light of dawn filtering through the glass. His hands rested on the Bible where his letter still lay hidden. He hadn't needed it. Not yet. He thought of Sierra, of the soldiers who had died overseas, of the oath he had spoken when he was 18 years old, trembling but proud. And as the sunlight touched his face, he whispered into the silence, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts."